Hello?
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention?
Welcome aboard Frank's Magic Bus. For the next 2 hours, Frank Welch takes you on a musical journey. Now, without further ado, Frank Welch.
To celebrate this anniversary reissue and remastering from EMI, now the official name of the album was The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. But that's probably the only time I'm going to draw it out like that. We always just called it the Ziggy Stardust album. Kind of the same way, Sgt. Pepper. Who would say out the long title and draw that out? You just say Sgt. Pepper's for short. Anyway, we're going to talk one-on-one here. It's with Ken Scott, the producer of that David Bowie classic, which really, when you think about it, it came out in the summer of 1972. And Ziggy Stardust kind of was the Sgt. Pepper album of the glam rock movement. Ken has a book out, too, about his work, engineering and producing stuff from Pink Floyd and the Beatles and Abbey Road through the Ziggy Stardust years with David Bowie. The name of the book is Abbey Road to Ziggy Stardust. And Ken Scott says that David Bowie was the most remarkable singer he ever worked with. He says that because he would set the levels, Ken would, and David Bowie would sing these songs and nail them in one take. And he would also use acoustic guitar, Ken would, on every track on the Ziggy Stardust album. Every song has acoustic guitar. But he would use it kind of as a hi-hat. So we're going to talk with Ken Scott, the producer of the Ziggy Stardust album, one-on-one. This all leads up in the early 1970s. So you go from the Beatles and Pink Floyd and all that and Jeff Beck to David Bowie, who at that time, now you were involved not just in Ziggy Stardust, but before that, Hunky Dory, right?
Yeah, well, I actually started with David. I engineered a lot of the Space Oddity album and Man Who Sold the World. That's how I met him in the first place, when Tony Visconti was still producing him. And David had taken a break. He came in the studio. By this time, I'd left Abbey Road and moved to an independent studio called Trident. He came in to produce a friend of his, and because I'd worked with him in the past, I was put on the sessions. And in the course of conversation, I happened to mention that I was getting fed up just engineering. I wanted to start production. And he said that I've just signed a record deal, a new management deal, and they want to put me into the studio to record an album so they can get me a record deal. I was going to produce it myself. I don't know if I'm capable of doing that. Will you co-produce it with me? So, of course, I leapt at it, and that led to Hunky Dory.
That is amazing. And then, wasn't it a deal where you guys had either just finished Hunky Dory or you were still working on it by the time you were already working on Ziggy Stardust?
Yeah, we'd finished Hunky Dory a couple of weeks after that. I saw David in the corridor at Trident, and he said, "Going to go in and do another album." And I said, "You've got to be joking. Hunky Dory isn't even out yet." And he told me how the management wanted to have another album ready to go. And he said that, but I don't think you'll like this one as much. It's more rock and roll, and that led to Ziggy.
I think it was more rock and roll. I mean, some of the stuff that was on there is just...
yeah, I've gone through this a lot in my own head. If going by the sort of timing of the two albums, they were so close. And if you take something like Queen Bitch, that would fit perfectly along with the more rock and roll stuff on Ziggy, and some of the stuff on Ziggy would fit in perfectly with the more acoustic stuff on Hunky Dory. So, to me, it's almost just with changing the running orders a little, you could finish up with a great double album.
That is interesting because, once in a while we will hear a classic rock artist say that these albums could have been one good long single album. Of course, you've heard that over the years with the Beatles' White Album. A lot of the critics say that this should have been just a kind of a condensed single album. I kind of disagree. I think the gibberish Revolution 9 was the only thing I think they could have left off that. But
I tend to agree. Luckily, that was one of the things that Jeff recorded. I didn't have to sit through that one too much. So.
I mean, we all love John Lennon. We all do and everything and all the cryptic stuff on there. But at the time, I kind of skipped over that on the vinyl album. Revolution.
I still do, yeah.
That's kind of funny. And we are talking one-on-one on Frank's Magic Bus with Ken Scott, the producer of David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust album, about how hectic it was in 71, 72. Glam rock was really thriving. It was the hot new genre in rock. And when Bowie did Ziggy Stardust and released it in the summer of 72, after that, there was no stopping David Bowie and glam rock in America or England. Then you had Aladdin Sane right after Ziggy Stardust.
yes.
Well, how did they all tie together with that? That was kind of a...
Well, that came after he had his first sort of real tour of the States, and he was affected by his tour and what he saw in the States, and started to write Aladdin Sane. And to take it to its sort of full conclusion of being more American, we actually started it off in New York at the RCA studios in New York, and he was joined by Mike Garson, who... It's fascinating that the changes that he's gone through piano-wise. The first album, Hunky Dory, was Rick Wakeman, who is very classically trained, brilliant pianist.
Later on of Yes, of course.
Oh, right, absolutely. Then on Ziggy, it was very sort of simplistic. It was basically David and Ronno playing pianos. There's one track on there, and I can't remember which one, where we literally had to do the left hand first and then the right hand because neither of them could play it completely together. And then you go to the complete avant-garde jazz type piano of Aladdin Sane. It's if anything, it was the keyboards that changed more than anything in David's albums. The rest of it was much the same. That's
fascinating. A lot of the acoustic guitar sound was kind of similar through those albums there.
Yeah.
Now, Mick Ronson, the great guitarist, how much acoustic work did he do, or is it mostly electric?
Mostly electric. The rhythm acoustics are generally David.
After the Ziggy Stardust, now, this is the big 40th anniversary.
Oh, don't keep reminding me.
I know. Tell me about it. I had just gotten out of high school. Tell me about it. Was there a lot of stuff left over, or stuff that you think was worthwhile that will be part of this that was left in the cutting floor?
If it hasn't come out by now, then it wasn't worth it. As we went in to record Ziggy with more songs than we knew we'd need. We generally do that on an album because you know that at some point there is going to be one or two that for one reason either they don't fit in with everything else or you're having difficulty just getting them to feel right. So those can then be pushed to one side, and then you're not left panicking at the end, we don't have enough material. So that's why we go in with more. Anything that was left over, we just either didn't finish or didn't think it was worthy of going on the album. So, no, there's very little. On the 5.1, I know when I did that, there's Bombers, there's Velvet Gold Mine. Generally speaking, they weren't taken to completion because we didn't think they would fit in.
Of course, back in those days, we have to think back, this is the days of vinyl albums only. Yeah. And that's how you recorded, you planned it and worked it toward the vinyl album. You always were conscious of time, weren't you? Like you wanted to do 40 to 45 minutes an album?
Yeah, it was about 24 minutes a side. Otherwise, you could actually put on, I think the maximum was about 30 minutes. But what happened was you had to keep the volume really low, the more time you put on there. And so with vinyl, the quality of vinyl for pop records back then was so bad that you wanted to try and keep it as loud as you could, which is one of the things that amazes me about today. With CDs and everything, you have no problems with noise, and yet everyone's compressing the hell out of everything to try and make it louder, and it's absolutely pointless.
You know, it's funny you just said that because a good buddy of mine who was really into music said he would shoot me if I didn't ask you about what you thought of the modern way that people listen to music now, which is downloading MP3s. How has that affected the sound that you produced?
Well, luckily, I don't think the material that's coming out from the most record companies is good enough to warrant the good sound. So,
I agree with you on that.
But
I agree with you.
What I will say is that you know that Apple now their downloads are moving over to basically high def. They're doing 96K 24 bits. And everything will be downloaded that way. So then the quality will be there on the downloads, and it will be up to the public to decide how they want to listen to it.
We are talking one-on-one with Ken Scott on Frank's Magic Bus. Ken was a producer of the David Bowie album Ziggy Stardust, and Ken elaborates on why those early 70s Bowie albums sound so crystal clear today. When you were recording, of course, being conscious back then, like I said, was all geared toward vinyl albums and everything. Were you also, being in England, I know you did a lot of it in the USA too, but David Bowie, his early albums there, being British, did you want to, or did he want to do them in stereo, live to stereo?
Well, by that time we'd moved on. We were, if I remember correctly, we started Hunky Dory on 16 tracks, so it gave you the freedom more to pan things a bit better. So we were certainly more into stereo at that point. Stereo had caught on in England by that point. I think if I remember correctly, Abbey Road was only ever issued in stereo. So
yeah, I do believe that's true. Yeah, that was
stereo had caught on by that time in England. So everything was basically done that way.
Throughout those the early 70s and the mid 70s and everything, touring with David Bowie. Now, you probably weren't on the road with him. You were in the studio with him a lot. But those first couple of albums, America really didn't know quite what to think of Bowie. I remember after I got out of high school that over in England, glam rock was really big way before it was in the USA. In fact, it never really caught on in the USA like it did. I mean, T-Rex only had like one hit here, you know? Yeah. But in England, it was the thing. Did you kind of notice the difference when Bowie came with the big tour and the makeup and everything and drag here?
Did I notice it? No, not really, because I never saw any of his American shows really until much later on. But some things just don't change. If you take a band like the Scissor Sisters, who are a New York band, they're huge the rest of the world, and still most people over here have never heard of them.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. So, and it is all down to that whole effeminate, androgynous type situation. Over here, still can't quite get it yet. But we in England, we've had huge sort of female impersonators on TV being huge stars for many, many years. I think the only one over here that ever actually really did anything was RuPaul.
I think, Benny Hill, the old comedy of Benny Hill, a lot of that was guys in drag, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. But we grew up with pantomime, which is a very big theatrical thing in England every Christmas. You always take your kids. They're fairy stories, that kind of thing. But the way it goes is the lead, the male lead is generally played by a female, and and vice versa. The female lead is kind of played by a male. So we've been raised on that. So we're totally used to that kind of thing.
So everybody was used to in England in 72 and 73. Like I said, that was really the big thing. And what is amazing now is we play right here on my show, Frank's Magic Bus, we'll play New York Dolls. But I remember back in 73, 74, I swear you would be hard-pressed to ever hear the New York Dolls on a USA rock station.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and T-Rex had, Get It On, Bang a Gong, and maybe Jeepster, and that was about it.
Yeah.
But maybe it was the testosterone of the time in the USA with males. They just didn't relate to that and catch on to it. I know that Bowie, I've looked back and I've seen films of his concert of the Ziggy tour, and a lot of his audience was female, and they would kind of almost dress in drag.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was amazing driving around London at that point and seeing both males and females trying to emulate David. It was incredible.
And they would call themselves space cadets, right?
Yes.
What a time that was. Well, anyway, your book coming out.
Look, I couldn't miss that day. It's the 40th anniversary of the release of Ziggy.